pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac, and welcome back to my channel. This is part 2 of my November Bales report, which I will be doing with water only. Where's Jesus when I need him? So let's finish up my Bales. The last one I talked about on part 1 was the resurrection of Joan Ashby. So next up is this gorgeous book, The Lauras by Sarah Taylor. Isn't that beautiful? I just love the cover, but didn't love what was inside. It's about a road trip between a mother and her, how old is the daughter? Well, there's some gender stuff which I didn't get to before I bailed, but if it's a daughter or a son or transgender, I don't know. Mother and child anyway, and I think she's about 12. And the mother leaves the husband and they go on this road trip, and it was so boring and the writing was so uninteresting. So, like a handful of the ones I'm going to talk about in this part 2 of the Bale video, they were just stories. There was not any evidence of literary crafting, and that's a sure route to a Bale for me. If I just want to hear a story, I'll talk to my friend or my mom. Stories are wonderful, but I want more in my books. The next one was my first novel by Sarah Waters, and hopefully not my last, but I didn't like it. It's called The Little Stranger. The first thing to say is the audio narrator was Simon Vance. Now, Simon Vance, my first exposure to Simon Vance, who I guess is some famous actor. I don't watch movies or TV, really, so I don't know. But my first exposure to him as an audio narrator was Bring Up the Bodies, the second volume in the Hilary Mantel trilogy. And he did an amazing job. He didn't actually narrate the audiobook for Wolf Hall. That was a different narrator whose name I don't remember, but both of them were equally masterful in their narration. And the second time I tried an audiobook narrated by Simon Vance was the one about the Dr. Zhivago that I bailed on last month. And like most nonfiction, the writing wasn't very interesting, and he was reading every sentence, and most of it was, this KGB desk clerk wrote the following memo and sent it to this KGB operative in Odessa. And he read all of that dry, dreary, dull prose as if it was coming out of the mouth of King Henry VIII. And similarly, his voice didn't match this story. I don't think he should be allowed to narrate anything post-Tudor era, because his dulcet tones and rather pompous voice matches the stories of that era perfectly, but nothing post-Tudor. And I listened to 20%, 25%, and I just didn't give a rat's ass about any of these people. Apparently it ends up becoming a ghost story. I didn't get that far. If I had known it was going to be a ghost story, I wouldn't have even tried it. So I bailed. But Sarah Waters is supposed to be a really good writer, and she may not be for me, but I would give her another chance. Definitely. Next was a memoir by Armistead Maupin. It's brand new, hot off the press, Logical Family. And I'm interested in Armistead Maupin. I've never read his famous series Tales of the City, but I'm so familiar with it that I feel like I've read it. Everybody I know has read it and talks about it to me all the time, and it's one of those things like, I don't have to read this. But it certainly has a central place in the gay literary canon. I don't like the word canon, but I haven't come up with a substitute. The only book I've read by him was the one about the hoax. It was based on a true story, and I didn't like that novel. It was called I've forgotten, but anyway, I'll put it in the below. I think it was probably by the second chapter that I realized, Sean, you don't like memoirs, and especially not ones that are centered on dysfunctional families. What the hell are you doing? So I stopped. No, I don't. I just don't care about people's relationship with their mother. Like, write a novel. shape it, make it literarily interesting. But memoir, boo, I've read too many, and no, I don't care. The next one, I think I will admit I was probably overly hasty about this. The Icelandic gay novel Moonstone by Sean. Moonstone, the Boy Who Never Was. It started out so compellingly with this sex scene between a man and a 15-year-old male prostitute. That was one of the most amazing openings to a novel in recent memory. But it soon kind of stalled out, I thought, and I stopped being mesmerized quite early and found this is it. I soured on it quite quickly, but it's one that I think I might have been a little bit too hasty in bailing on, so I'm going to keep it and I will try it again. Just the fact that I don't really know how to express why I bailed, that's a good sign that I bailed too quickly. This next one was also a really fast bail, but I have no regrets, but a lot of disappointment because I was so looking forward to this novel. Erotic Stories for Punjabi Widows by Balikar Jaswal. And I was actually going to be doing a buddy read of this with Claire Reads Books. And I read the first chapter and almost puked. I just thought this is just chick lit. And I mean, I'm not judging anybody that likes those kind of stories, but it was just so light. And also, I didn't see any humor in it. And maybe I didn't get far enough to experience the humor, but I just felt, again, that this was just a story. There was no evidence of literary craftsmanship at all. It just read like Sikh chick lit. So, no thank you. I bailed very early on that one. I think chapter 1. The next one, I guess I'm not terribly surprised, but I really hoped that this would go better than it did. And that's Kazuo Ishiguro's The Buried Giant, his most recent novel, 2015. And I did this on audio, sometimes following along in the book, sometimes not. The audio was really good. Narration was great. And I got up to about 40%, 45%, and just, it was boring. So boring. Now, there's things I appreciated about it, but not enough to finish reading it. The old couple, and it's set in Arthurian Britain, or just after. And there's the old married couple at the center of it. Are really adorable, and I love them. And I also was intrigued by the theme of they were having some kind of supernaturally induced dementia. Like it wasn't just them, everybody around them was forgetting things, and their memories of things like their own children were very hazy. And so they set out on a journey to visit their son, who they only dimly remember, and there's certain phases of their days where they kind of forget what he looks like and maybe forget about him entirely, but through all that gauze in their brains, they're on a journey to the town where he lives, but they can't really remember why he lives there. And there's all these obstacles in their path, and there's ogres. I'm not interested in books that have ogres in them. And what killed it for me finally was the appearance at around the 40% mark of Sir Gawain. You know, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight or whatever. I hate when historical or mythological figures show up in my fiction. Don't do that! Lots of people love it, but I effing hate it! And I was just bored. Like, there wasn't really much happening. And I think at the point, they're staying at this monastery that seems like it might not actually be a monastery, and they want to meet with the old head monk, and they're escorted into his room, and he's such a sickly old man, and I realized that I was supposed to be feeling an ominous vibe about this, and instead it was making me sick to my stomach. Like, is this gonna go all gothic or something on me? Ugh, so no, I don't think Kazuo Ishiguro's for me. The more I think about Never Let Me Go, the less I like it in my mind. I just downgraded it from 4 stars to 3 this morning, and I think I downgraded it from 5 stars to 4 about 6 months ago. So yeah, I don't know. I know I have one subscriber who loves him, so please don't take it personally that I didn't enjoy it. And I'm glad that you did, and many people do, including the Nobel Prize Committee. But I don't think he's a writer for me. I realize how much I talk about the audio narration in explaining why I bail on books. And so that gives me pause. This is an ongoing journey. I don't mean to over dramatize it, but my relationship to audiobooks is always kind of stimulatingly problematic. And when I think about the number of books that I bailed on this month because I didn't like the audio narration or I got thrown off by it, I just wonder if I might end up moving away from the media altogether. But then I think about experiences like Simon Vance doing Bring Up the Bodies, or Lawrence Bouvard doing The Portable Veblen, or this month the Irish guy doing The Heart's Invisible Furies, and those experiences were peak and enhanced the actual text. So I think I'll keep going. But anyway, I digress, but it's all kind of on topic. Did You Ever Have a Family by Bill Clegg? I believe it was a 2016 novel, and it got very mixed reviews, but most of the reviews that I heard at the time said that the writing was beautiful, but it was too emotionally intense. And I thought, oh, I like emotionally intense. I should give it a try. And so I tried it on audio, and I did find the ebook on Scribd so that I could do it in tandem when I had the time. But it's a rare thing in that it was narrated by the author himself. It's rare to find an audiobook of fiction narrated by the author, and he read it very well. It's about a middle-aged woman who had been estranged from her daughter for many years, but they had reconciled, and it's the morning before her wedding, and this middle-aged woman also has a younger black boyfriend, and there'd been a lot of acrimony in this, I think it seems to be a small town where they all live. And at 5 o'clock in the morning, the middle-aged, the protagonist, she steps out into the yard for some reason, pick up the paper, or I don't remember, and the house explodes. There was some kind of a freak gas malfunction, and the house explodes, killing everybody. Her boyfriend, her daughter, the fiance, us, everybody she ever cared about in her life. It was an unspeakable tragedy. And then it's the aftermath of that, and she, of course, falls apart. She leaves town, doesn't tell anybody where she's going, and she lives in a motel several hours away for weeks and weeks, and doesn't even give her real name when in the hotel where she's staying. And it shows her black boyfriend's mother's grief and just everybody connected to the story. And I loved that. It was beautiful. The writing is just gorgeous, and I was right there with the protagonist and her boyfriend's mother and the other characters that were directly affected by this tragedy. It was so well done. But I don't remember how far I got into it, 40-50%. And he lost me. Bill Clegg lost me when he kept bringing in peripheral characters and exploring their trauma-laden backstories with the same level of detail. And I just thought, you have enough gorgeous tragedy, compelling trauma in this story. Don't bring in more. I can't take any more on, and you don't need it. It's too much. So that's why I bailed. But I also think that I was just starting it, or getting into it, as I was finishing John Boyne's The Heart's Invisible Furies, which was a very emotional and perhaps, I guess, emotionally draining novel. So maybe that was part of what affected me. I think I will try it again. It did start to feel like trauma porn, so I bailed. And lastly, Willa Cather's novel Shadows on the Rock. I believe it was written in the 1940s, and it's set in 17th century Quebec. And I have my own personal issues with Willa Cather because I only have been exposed to her when I took a class on James, Wharton, and Cather at graduate school when I did my MA. And actually, that class wasn't bad. I liked the prof, but my experience of grad school was so negative that I can't sort of separate it out. All I remember is that I read several of her novels in that class, and I don't remember anything about them. I don't remember if I liked the writing or anything. I was just in that kind of deer in the headlights. I have to read this for class. I have to write an essay about it. Space that just sapped my enjoyment of good literature for years. And I still am not able to separate that out, so I can't do Willa Cather yet. Maybe never. So there was that. I also didn't care for the audio narrator. And what pushed me over the edge was suddenly we'd been talking about the young girl and her father, the apothecary, who had been friends with Frontenac in Paris and had come over. And that was all fairly interesting. But then suddenly there's this old nun who becomes the central focus for several chapters. It's what it felt like to me. And I'm just thinking, who is this old nun and why am I hearing all this backstory about her? I don't want to hear about some old nun. So, bailed. It was just not meant to be at this time. I will probably try Willa Cather again because so many people whose opinions I respect, love her. That is my November Bales wrap-up. Are there any of these that you think I would like if I tried them another time? Any comments? Have you read any of these or bailed on any of these? I would be interested in any comments you have as per usual. And thank you for watching.